keeping you company this Ramadan.
Well, the time is just gone 1 minute past 5 p.m. and you are tuned into the Iftar Drive right here on Salam Media. We'll be back, we'll be with you right until 6, just close on to 6 p.m. when the time of Iftar sets in. And this is the day 20 of the day of Ramadan, of the month of Ramadan. And we will continue broadcasting at this time throughout the entire month of Ramadan. But right now, we're going across to a story that is trending big time in South Africa. We are talking about the escape of Thabo Bester and a person who had faked his own death. And we are now joined by former SAPS investigative psychologist Gerard Labuschagne, and just to get his thoughts, his views on Thabo Bester. Gerard, good afternoon to you, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, and a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners.
Well, you're one of the few people, Gerard, that can give us a deeper insight into Thabo Bester and who the person is, his thinking, and you've basically got into his mind because you've had the opportunity of doing this interview. And perhaps let's just take a step back. Let's just understand the circumstances surrounding which you had that interview, and then we can build on with the discussion to see, how things have evolved since then. So just give us some sort of a background, your initial contact with Thabo Bester, and what did you intend doing, when you had this interview with him?
Sure. So essentially back in 2011, I was in charge of the South African Police Services profiling unit. So by training, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I received further training in profiling. So we were often involved in serial rape cases, serial murder cases. So this kind of case fell within our mandate, although it was not investigated by us. We typically were advisors to other detectives. And he had just been arrested in connection with the 2 rapes he committed in KZN. And of course, there was another murder that occurred in Milderton in Cape Town. So I had been asked to come down and basically do an interview with him. Kind of twofold, to give some advice to the investigating officers, but also, as I did tell him, with the potential that I might be called to testify at sentencing if it was felt that there was a need for me to do so. So essentially it had sort of a twofold purposes. And also, as I did say to him, we always like to, research and learn from the offenders who committed these various crimes. So if there is one that's happy to speak to us, we're always going to talk to them. So that was kind of really the purpose at that particular point in time.
Yes. Now, clearly, we are talking of someone who was a convicted murderer and a rapist, and these are serious crimes that are committed, that have been committed. But just looking at the type of person that he was, his personality, his body language, his behavior, his responses when you interviewed him, how did he come across to you, Gerard?
Well, as you pointed out, he would be regarded as a serial rapist because there were 2 separate incidences of rape that occurred. And then we have a 3rd incident which involved the murder of a female. So our concern would be that he's definitely a serial rapist, but he's stepping into the realm of serial murder because he's now killing subsequent victims. And that's quite common in our serial murderers who first start out with rapes and then move over into raping and murdering. So that was the first concern, obviously, at that point in time. As for him as a person, he's a consummate con man. He had previous fraud convictions from about 2008, 2009 in Johannesburg. These crimes themselves were about conning people, initially to steal arbitrary items like cell phones and laptops, really petty kind of fraud or petty theft, but obviously escalating into the sexual crimes. But everything he tells you, you have to second guess. So, in the interview itself, he was really portraying himself as having had this very horrific upbringing involving sexual abuse towards him, not knowing who his father was, a troubled upbringing, etc. But again, you have to be aware of the person that you're talking to. You cannot believe a word that comes out of his mouth. And very much it's about impression management. So even when he spoke about the cases, he said, with the rapes, I only realized afterwards that what I'd done was rape. And for example, with the murder, he said, I can plead guilty to bringing a knife into the argument, but I can't plead guilty to murdering her because that's not what I set out to do. So always kind of admitting to something, but softening it to try and create that sympathetic impression with the person that's sitting in front of him. And that's kind of what he does. And if you look at what he's been accused of doing since then, obviously the escape, But more so, if you look at these allegations that he was held, in prison, participating in these fancy media events. And once he escaped, he was conning people in terms of a construction company with his partner. It's very clear he's just really continued with that conning, manipulative behavior, but even more successfully since he went to prison than prior to him going to prison.
Well, this is exactly the point that you're making, saying that, he is a skilled con man. And the point that you made that, when you interviewed him, that you cannot accept a word that he is saying. And at the end of the day, again, what you'll find, I think, and I suppose in your line of work, you must have come across, people who try to play the victim, and this is exactly, when he's trying to give you some sort of a history about being sexually abused and who the type of person, his upbringing and all of that. He's trying to play on sympathies as well.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's impression management. Whoever's in front of him, he's going to try and sell a story that's going to be to his advantage. So in that context, he might have seen me as someone that could sway some decision-making, I guess, potentially from a judicial point of view. I don't know. And therefore, he's going to tell me what he thinks I want. I could hear that might have an impact on me. And that's what he does, of course, when he's conning people out of money, from this construction company scam to other types of scams. So without a doubt, I mean, that's who he is. Like I've said a few times before, if Thabo Bester tells you that your heart is beating, you better go get it checked out by a cardiologist, because you just cannot accept what he's saying is the truth. And I think that's going to be a lifelong thing with him. I don't think it's going to change. What I did point out, for those of you that might have seen the 20 minutes of my interview that I did with him, that's on social media, that's 20 minutes out of an hour, almost 2 hour long interview. It's the last 20 minutes. I sort of say to him, well, unfortunately, a lot of people go through many of the horrific things that you're describing in their childhoods. And sometimes some of them go through even worse stuff, but they're not all going out and committing fraud, conning people, raping them, murdering them. So the court's probably not going to see that as some kind of an excuse for what you've done, to get you kind of a softer sentence.
Yes. Now, just coming back to this entire escape, and we know that obviously Tanzania is a country that he's gone to, but looking at someone who had faked his own death, where people, and convincingly, Gerard, where people were convinced that he had died in a fire in the prison in Bloemfontein, and subsequently found out that this wasn't the case. Now, what does it take? I mean, what type of person actually does this?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, it's an indication of his level of intelligence. He's very smart. I mean, make no mistake. He might have started off with petty kind of crimes, with his fraud cases, then escalated, of course, to rapes and murders, which are very serious. But he's not a stupid person. And sadly, he's just decided to use his intelligence for the wrong reasons. Of course, you would have to have money. You're not going to get yourself out of prison without bribing people with a lot of money. And in our prisons, if you have money, you can pretty much get what you want. And as we see, you can even get yourself out of prison. So, money, intelligence, obviously outside assistance, allegedly by this girlfriend of his and other people. People have made allegations that, there must have been the police involved and high-ranking politicians. I don't think that's necessary to do what he did. I think you just have to have the money and know who to bribe to be able to get out of prison. And, we've seen this before. I think it was Ananias Mate, which was a very well-known serial criminal who allegedly slipped through the bars at, I think it was CMAX in Pretoria, and later it came out that he just bribed his way and walked right out the front door. So, definitely, I think this is part of his personality, this conning, manipulation. He clearly is not remorseful for his crimes because he's escaped. Will he change? I seriously doubt it. And probably Thabo Bester is going to be the way he is till the day he dies, which means obviously he's a huge risk to society.
Well, he certainly is a huge risk, but also in terms of being a con artist of note. And we've learned now with regard to his arrest in Tanzania, and there is talk of a celebrity doctor, her father, who is a prison warden. Now, he's made inroads into these lives, or into the lives of these people, to that extent where they have basically assisted him in escaping and getting out of the country to Tanzania.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's testimony to how good he is at manipulating people, So yes, these people are obviously going to be held accountable. How much the manipulation would be taken into account when they have to sentence these people for whatever their roles is, the courts will obviously have to decide. But it's very difficult when you are a 40, 50-year-old man, an adult, and you're trying to say that you were completely under the spell of another individual. And that you didn't realize that helping someone escape was wrong. So it's going to be a tough ride for the people that were involved with him. But I think, yes, he must bear some responsibility, because without that, I don't think these people would have gotten involved in potentially criminal acts. Maybe corrupt wardens, that's a different story. But, family and friends, etc. And, he's going to manipulate whoever serves his purpose. And once they're done serving his purpose, he's going to cast them aside. He's not going to care about these people and the impact of what he's done.
Well, Gerard, what we also see is the radar and the spotlight is on the prison authorities as well, G4S in particular. And, this is now a company that is running our prisons, and they've come now under the spotlight with regard to their role, where, their employees have been accused of helping him flee from there. And just looking at our prison system in itself, clearly these are calls for concerns that it is open to manipulation. It is open to a situation where dangerous criminals can actually just literally walk out, scot-free.
Yep. Look, I think a lot of, as you say, fingers have been pointed at G4S, and of course they must be held accountable for this particular incident. But I think, when I hear correctional services being critical of G4S, I mean, that's really the pot calling the kettle black, because correctional services has lost and allowed many more prisoners to escape than I think G4S ever has. And I saw a news report that I think last year alone, correctional services was responsible for, over 21 prisoners having escaped from their facilities. So correctional services will be very careful to be pointing fingers at other people. But of course, every case, people have to be held accountable. The problem is, whenever you have the population that you have in a prison, which is a criminal population, they have limited access to something, there will always be corruption and bribery. So, G4S never, for example, I know back many years ago, they didn't employ ex-correctional services members. They employed people fresh off the street, so to speak, in an attempt to not bring that sort of, potentially tainted people into the environment. But you're dealing with people who are going to create that environment, which is the prisoners that you're working with. They will offer people lots of money for the simplest of basic items, slowly get them involved. And once you've started that pathway down, assisting a prisoner doing something you shouldn't, they've kind of got their grips into you, their fingers into you, because you're not really going to get out of that very easily. So it's endemic throughout the world that prisons are corrupt contexts, because you have people who are desperate for things they don't have. So, that's very difficult to ultimately control. I mean, there are checks and balances that one can try and implement. But yeah, I think, G4S, obviously accountable. They only run 2 of our prisons, as far as I know, in South Africa, one in Limpopo and this particular one in Mangaung. So again, the overwhelming majority of the problematic behavior is taking place in correctional services prisons, which is obviously then a huge problem.
Well, I'm sure, over the next few weeks, we will share, obviously this entire case will shed a lot more light, Gerard, and we're all, waiting with bated breath to see what transpires, because at this point in time, what we're hearing from the police, they are saying they're expecting more arrests to be made in connection with his escape. And I see even the president of the country is getting involved, saying that heads will roll over Thabo Bester's escape.
Yeah, and as they should. People have to be held accountable. This is very embarrassing for the country. I mean, international media has picked this up. Of course, local media has gone crazy with the story, and rightly so. It's just a fascinating story. And, as you say, truth is stranger than fiction. And heads are going to have to roll, because they'll look very foolish if they cannot even hold anybody accountable for what has happened.
Well, Gerard, thank you very much for that, and taking time out and providing us with an insight into Thabo Bester, and also just unpacking the entire saga that has been unfolding. We wish you all the best, and we do appreciate your time with us this afternoon.
Thank you, and I hope I haven't kept you from your iftar.
No, you haven't. My iftar is still another 40-odd minutes from now, so don't worry.
Not long.
I've survived. Take care. Right, Gerard.
Right.
Yes, the time is just gone, 16 minutes past 5, and that was Gerard Labuschagne with us. And yes, this thing is not going to go away. In fact, it's just basically starting to emerge. A lot is actually starting to emerge, and we see that even members of parliament that have gotten involved. So this is a tension that is right at the top, where the members of parliament have grilled the G4S directors, calling into question the company's version of events into the Thabo Bester prison escape. And this is now a convicted murderer. He is a rapist. And G4S once again under the spotlight. But again, as Gerard Labuschagne says, that our correctional services have not been squeaky clean either. There have been many prisoners that have escaped out of our prisons that are in prisons that are under the control of the prison authorities and the prison services in South Africa. And what we are seeing coming out as well in terms of some of the answers that have come through from the G4S directors, admitting that a television stand could have been used to smuggle a body into the prison as part of the escape plan. And this has not gone down well with members of parliament that are grilling these directors, and cops substitution, all of this and questions that they ask, where did they come from? Did they come from inside the prison? Did you do your head count? Did they come in from outside? Did they walk in? Were they murdered in prison? Did they come in dead? Now, these were all questions that were asked to the directors of G4S, which sadly could not be answered. And this is something that is definitely not going to go in a hurry. It's been a huge embarrassment for the country, and we definitely will follow up developments. But it was just wonderful getting an insight into the mind of Thabo Bester from a psychologist perspective. The time is just gone, 18 minutes past 5. We're going to go for a break and we'll come back, and we're going to head towards our humanitarian segment with Muallim Kausar Kader this afternoon, and that's going to take us through to the time of iftar in Johannesburg at around a minute or two just before 6 p.m. So stay with us.